March 13th, 1947, 7:15 in the evening. The Shrine Auditorium in downtown Los Angeles glowed against the twilight, its Moorish architecture lit by Klieg lights sweeping the California darkness. Gregory Peck stood backstage adjusting his bow tie, his reflection staring back with that measured, calm audiences mistook for confidence. Nominated for Best Actor for The Yearling, he should have felt anticipation instead. His stomach tightened. The familiar knot, the one that came every time he saw a man in uniform, remembering that while other men his age had stormed beaches and died in foxholes, he'd been making $40,000 a picture. A back injury from Berkeley rowing. That's what had kept him out. The Army doctors had been polite but firm. He could still feel that rejection letter's weight, heavier than any Oscar. Weight. Because what happened in the next 17 minutes wouldn't just change one man's evening. It would force Gregory Peck to face something he'd carried since December 8th, 1941, something deeper than guilt. A debt he could never repay. And tonight, standing between a decorated veteran and a locked door, he would finally understand that some principles matter more than ceremony, even when that ceremony might make you a star. The sound of voices rising near the entrance pulled him from his thoughts, not excited chatter. Something sharper, the kind of tone that comes when power meets powerless. As Gregory moved toward the commotion, his 6 feet 3 inches carrying him through the crowd. People parted without thinking. Through the forest of tuxedos and gowns, he could see them. 3 ushers in burgundy jackets blocked the main entrance behind them. A man in a wheelchair. Gregory could see the gleam of metal hooks where hands should have been prosthetic hooks catching the chandelier light. The uniform, unmistakable navy dress blues, pressed and proper with ribbons that told stories. Gregory had only acted out ribbons that meant islands where men gave pieces of themselves so people like Gregory could stand in lobbies wearing tuxedos. Have you ever seen someone trying to maintain dignity while being turned away from a place they had every right to enter? The head usher, thin with wire-rimmed glasses, spoke in that tone reserved for bad news, dressed as policy. "I'm sorry, sir, but the main entrance requires a semi-grand staircase, 23 steps. We have protocols, fire codes. Perhaps if you contacted us in advance, we could have made accommodations. The service entrance is much more convenient, completely discreet." A veteran sat perfectly still, jaw set in that way. Gregory recognized someone whispered behind him. "A woman in diamonds, poor thing. They should have a separate entrance, it's kinder." Gregory's hands felt his pockets. An old tell his director said it meant he was thinking. His wife Greta knew better. It meant he was angry, holding it and gathering it like a lawyer preparing cross-examination. The usher continued. "The service entrance has a view of the courtyard. Really no different when you think about it." That's when Gregory noticed Harold Russell's face. Not humiliation, not rage, just weary acceptance, the expression of a man who had lost both hands on June 6, 1944. And somehow that qualified him for service entrances. When have you seen quiet power use nothing but presence to change a room? Gregory stepped forward. Didn't rush, his footsteps measured, deliberate. The crowd parted. 6'3" and moral authority have that effect. He reached the ushers, positioned himself beside the wheelchair, and when he spoke, his voice had that quality. The one that made directors whisper. Atticus Finch, years before Harper Lee would write him quiet. Almost gentle, absolutely unmovable. "Excuse me." The ushers turned, recognition flickered Gregory Peck. The thin usher straightened, smiled with relief. "Mr. Peck, we're just explaining about our accessibility arrangements." Gregory held up one hand, patient, like a professor waiting for a student to finish before revealing their mistake. "I heard what you were explaining. Now let me explain something to you. This is Harold Russell, Sergeant Harold Russell. He's nominated tonight. 2 nominations, 1 competitive for Best Supporting Actor, 1 honorary for bringing hope and courage to his fellow veterans, to his performance in the best years of our lives. The film about soldiers coming home. The boar that took his hands on June 6th, 1944. The pause that followed with strategic silence his wake.
The lobby had gone quiet. So when you suggest to use the service entrance, what you're really suggesting is that a man who gave both his hands so we could stand here safe from tyranny should enter to the same door we use for deliveries.
As I draw understanding of protocol, the usher's face went pale. Mr. Peck, I didn't realize. That's precisely the problem. You didn't realize you saw a wheelchair and calculated the path of least resistance, not for him, for you, for your protocols. You didn't see Sergeant Russell. You saw an inconvenience with hooks. The younger usher started to speak. Gregory turned. Sergeant Russell didn't lose his hand so he could be relegated to service entrances. He lost them teaching soldiers how to stay alive, while I was making $40,000 a picture because a rowing injury kept me out of the war. I tried 3 times to enlist in. He let that sink in. Let the crowd hear the comparison. Do you remember when movie stars understood fame came with responsibility? So here's what's going to happen. You're going to find every available usher. You're going to carry Sergeant Russell up those stairs with more respect than you'd show the governor. And then you're going to explain why in 1947 a building hosting America's premier film awards doesn't have a ramp for the very men whose stories we're making millions telling. One usher objected. But sir, we've never what? Considered that the men who fought might want to attend the ceremony celebrating films about their sacrifice. Sergeant Russell is in the best years of our lives coming home to what? Service entrances and apologies. His voice found an edge. We spent 4 years telling the world Americans fight for dignity. We made films about it. We sold war bonds, and now we can't manage 23 stairs. The head usher looked at the gathering crowd, Louis B. Mayer, Sam Goldwyn, directors, executives, journalists with notebooks, all watching, all understanding something bigger was happening. The usher's voice barely audible. I'll get the staff immediately. Mr. Peck. Not arrangements, respect. Here's a difference. And next year this building will have a ramp or they'll find a different venue. This ends tonight. Have you ever seen one person's courage give permission for others to speak? 4 ushers materialized within 90 seconds. They approached Harold Russell's wheelchair with a kind of careful respect, usually reserved for religious artifacts or unexploded ordnance. One bent down, quietly asking Russell's preference. Would he prefer to remain seated or transfer to be carried? Russell indicated the chair. They lifted it. Strong men, union stagehands who built sets and moved equipment for 20 years, now movie a veteran with the care of pallbearers. And Gregory walked beside them, one hand resting on the wheelchair's arm, not helping, because Russell clearly didn't need help. Just present, standing witness, making sure every eye in that lobby understood that this was not charity. This was right. This was how it should have been from the beginning. At the top of the grand staircase, the crowd had gathered. Not the accidental gathering of people arriving late. The deliberate assembly, silent, watching a moment they'd remember longer than most of the evening's awards, longer than the speeches and the thank yous and the carefully practiced surprise. Someone started clapping. Gregory couldn't see who, but it spread. Not the theatrical pause of a premiere, something more, something that recognized that between the lobby and the top of those stairs, something fundamental had shifted. When they reached the main floor, Russell looked up at Gregory. While he spoke, his voice had the texture of gratitude mixed with something more complex. Something that understood what this had cost. What it meant for a nominee to risk his own evening for a stranger's dignity. You didn't have to do that, Mr. Peck. I've gotten used to service entrances. They're quieter, usually less fuss.
Gregory crouched down eye level the way he'd do years later in 1962 when playing a lawyer who believed every person, regardless of color or class or condition, deserved dignity. Sergeant Russell. With respect. Yes, I did. I spent 6 years feeling guilty about not serving, 6 years wondering if making movies about brave men, while brave men died, made me complicit or useful or just fortunate. Tonight I learned something. The debt isn't paid by feeling bad, it never was. It's paid by making sure the men who did serve, who gave pieces of themselves or all of themselves, never have to fight for basic respect in the country they defended. It's paid by using whatever small authority I have. And it is small. It's just borrowed fame, really. To insist that you enter through the front door.
The door you earned. The door every man who wore that uniform earned. Russell extended his hook. Gregory grasped it without hesitation. Without the flinched Russell had probably seen 1,000 times. Without the careful avoiding of eye contact that people did when they couldn't process the hooks as just part of a man. The metal was cool, functional, honest. Not a hand, but something more. Proof of sacrifice given freely, asked for by a country that had then too often forgotten what it asked. Around them, flashbulbs popped. Tomorrow someone would write about this, maybe not the lead story. Russell's double Oscar win would take that, an unprecedented achievement in Academy history. But this moment would be there in the follow-up paragraphs, in the gossip columns, and the trains. Peck defends veterans' dignity at Oscars. The Academy would quietly, without announcement, contract for a ramp to be built by next year's ceremony. The shrine would add 3 accessible entrances by 1948. Other venues would follow. Not because of Gregory's speech, Hollywood is full of speeches, but because Sam Goldwyn had been there, and Louis B. Mayer, and they'd seen how the moment played, how it looked. And they understood in that calculating producer way that a country that had just fought a war needed to believe that the men who fought it mattered. That night, the ceremony continued. Russell won both his Oscars, making history as the only man to receive 2 statues for one performance. Gregory lost his category to Frederick March, but found, sitting in the theater watching Russell accept his statues with those metal hooks gleaming under the stage lights, that he didn't mind, truly didn't mind. Some things matter more than golden statues. Some moments of basic human decency eclipse any award later, much later, returning to his home in Pacific Palisades as March became April. And the night air carried the salt smell of the Pacific. Gregory stood in his study looking at the telegram he kept since December of 1941. The Army rejection 4F classification due to spinal injury, unfit for service. He'd carried it like penance, rated on sleepless nights when the guilt became unbearable. Used it to justify every war film, every patriotic speech, every attempt to honor through art what he couldn't honor through service. But tonight, finally, he understood something. Service takes many forms. Sometimes it's landing at Normandy with the 1st Infantry Division, wading through water red with blood. Sometimes it's flying B-17s over Germany. Sometimes it's losing your hands teaching demolition so other men might live. And sometimes it's standing at the top of a staircase in a tuxedo that costs more than most families made in a month, and refusing to let protocol become prejudice. Sometimes it's using whatever authority you have, even the borrowed ephemeral authority of fame, to insist that the men who gave everything deserved to enter through the front door. He folded the telegram with care, placed it in the drawer, and closed it gently, not forgetting, never forgetting. The guilt would probably never fully leave. Survivor's guilt rarely does. But maybe forgiveness, even self-forgiveness, came not in grand gestures, but in small moments and choices, in standing up when standing up mattered, in recognizing that the debt, all unpayable and full, could at least be honored. One staircase at a time.
one door at a time, one moment when silence became impossible and action became necessary. This is what Hollywood used to mean. Not just the glamour and the fame, not just the red carpets and the statues and the premieres with searchlights. It meant that sometimes on an ordinary March evening when the cameras weren't rolling, a man who made millions pretending to be a hero could step aside and let an actual hero take center stage. If you remember when movie stars understood that their platform was a privilege, not a right, this channel preserves those moments when dignity wasn't negotiable. And respect was earned not just for what you achieved, but for what you defended. Share the story with someone who remembers what Hollywood had a conscience. When the men who stoned beaches were turned away at service entrances. Like if you believe these moments matter, subscribe to keep this era alive. And in the comments, tell us, have you seen someone use their position to defend someone powerless? When have you witnessed ordinary courage that changed how a room saw the world? Every memory you share keeps this history breathing. Every voice matters. Every moment of standing up for what's right deserves to be remembered.